Sometimes the hardest thing a father can do is look his son in the eye when he has nothing left to give. Theodore Hale knew that feeling well. At 54, he and his son Devon were homeless, sleeping in their truck, drifting through a dying town with only a toolbox between them and complete despair. Then they found an old diner, abandoned and forgotten. They started fixing it up just to have shelter, but as they cleaned and repaired, neighbors began stopping by. Word spread. What started as two men trying to survive became something the whole town needed, a place to gather, a reason to hope again. Could a father and son with nothing rebuild what an entire community had lost? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The truck's engine finally gave out just past the town limit sign. Theodore Hale sat behind the wheel, hands still gripping the cracked leather, and listened to the silence that followed the dying sputter. Beside him, his son Devon stared straight ahead through the dusty windshield at a town that looked like it had given up decades ago. "Well," Theodore said quietly, "I guess this is where we stop." Devon said nothing. He'd said very little for the past 300 miles, and Theodore couldn't blame him. What was there to say? "Sorry I lost everything we had. Sorry, the business partner I trusted cleaned out our accounts and disappeared. Sorry you gave up your apartment and your job to help me, and now we're sleeping in a truck that won't even run anymore." Theodore pushed open the door and stepped onto the cracked asphalt. The town of Milldale stretched before them like something from a forgotten photograph. Main Street ran straight through the center, lined with buildings that had once been proud. Brick facades with ornate cornices, large storefront windows that must have displayed goods and dreams. Now those windows were boarded up or broken, the boards themselves weathered grey, paint peeled from every surface. Weeds pushed through sidewalk cracks with the persistence of things that outlast human ambition. It was early November, and the wind carried the smell of coming winter, cold earth and distant wood smoke. A few cars were parked along the street, all of them at least 15 years old. A faded banner stretched across Main Street announced a fall festival from 2 years ago that no one had bothered to take down. Devon finally climbed out, pulling his jacket tighter. He was 28, but looked older now, his face lean and serious in a way it hadn't been a year ago. "How much money do we have left?" $43, Theodore said. "And whatever change is in the ashtray." "Great." Devon kicked at a loose chunk of asphalt. "So what's the plan, Dad?" "We're going to check into the Ritz." Theodore heard the anger underneath the sarcasm. It was better than the silence, he supposed. At least anger meant his son was still fighting. "Let's just walk," Theodore said. "See what's here." They left the truck where it died and walked into Milldale carrying everything they owned in 2 duffel bags and Theodore's toolbox. The toolbox was red metal, scratched and dented, with his father's initials still visible on the side. W.H. for William Hale. It had been the old man's, passed down when Theodore started his first construction job at 19. Inside were hand tools worn smooth by 3 generations of use. Hammers, screwdrivers, wrenches, a level that still read true. It was the last thing Theodore would give up, even if they had to sell everything else, which they had. They passed a grocery store that was still open, Phyllis's Market, according to the hand-painted sign. A small post office, a closed bank with soap-painted windows, a church with a few cars in the lot, its white steeple needing paint. Most of the other buildings were empty, their for-lease signs so faded the phone numbers were barely readable. Theodore had built things his whole life, started as a laborer, worked his way up, eventually started his own contracting company. For 25 years, Hale Construction had been solid, not huge but steady, honest, profitable. He'd employed good people, built good homes, sent Devon to college without loans. He'd been proud of what he'd created. Then Roger Sanderson came along with his investment opportunity. A commercial development project. Retail and residential mixed use, prime location. Roger had the connections, the permits, the vision. He just needed capital and a construction partner. Theodore could provide both. 50-50 split, Roger said. Partners. Theodore put in everything. Refinanced his house, leveraged the business, convinced Devon to invest his savings too. It was going to set them up for life, Roger promised. 6 months later, Roger was gone. The bank accounts were empty. The permits had never existed. The prime location belonged to someone else entirely, and the law said it was a civil matter, not criminal fraud, because Theodore had signed papers he should have read more carefully. The house went first, then the business. Theodore tried to keep his crew employed as long as possible, but without credit, without capital, the jobs dried up. One by one, good men he'd worked with for years had to find other work. By the end, it was just Theodore and Devon living in the truck, taking day labor when they could find it, drifting south away from the cold and the shame. "Dad!" Devon's voice pulled him back to the present. "Look at that!" Theodore followed his son's gaze to a building on the corner, set back slightly from the street. It was single-story, wider than the other storefronts, with a flat roof and large windows that ran along the front. The windows were covered with plywood, and the front door was secured with a chain and padlock, but the structure looked sound. Above the door, barely visible through years of grime and fading, was a hand-painted sign, "Riverside Diner." Something in Theodore's chest tightened. He'd always loved diners. The honest simplicity of them, the way they served as gathering places, the straightforward architecture designed for function and welcome. His father had taken him to diners on Saturday mornings when he was a boy, sitting at counters, drinking hot chocolate, while William drank coffee and talked with other working men about jobs and weather and life. "It's been closed a long time," Devon said, walking closer. Theodore followed, studying the building with a contractor's eye. The foundation looked solid, the walls plumb. The roof sagged slightly in the middle, but not dangerously. The windows were intact under the plywood. Paint was peeling everywhere, but that was cosmetic. The bones were good. "Why are we looking at an abandoned diner?" Devon asked. "Just looking," Theodore said. But he was doing more than looking. He was imagining. The door repaired, the windows cleaned, the sign repainted. Booths inside with red vinyl, a long counter with swivel stools, a kitchen that smelled like coffee and bacon. A place where people could sit and talk and feel like they belonged to something. He shook his head. Those were foolish thoughts for a man with $43 and nowhere to sleep tonight. They continued down the street, asking at the grocery store if there was anywhere cheap to stay. The woman behind the counter, Phyllis, according to her name tag, looked them over with sharp but not unkind eyes. "Nothing cheap in this town except the empty buildings," she said. "We haven't had a motel in 12 years. Nearest one's 20 miles south. Is there a shelter?" Devon asked. "Church program?" Phyllis shook her head. "We're too small for that kind of thing. Most folks in trouble here have family to help them." She paused, studying them. "You two in some kind of trouble?" "Just passing through," Theodore said. "Our truck broke down." "Passing through to where?" Theodore didn't have an answer. They'd been driving with no destination, just moving, as if motion itself could solve anything. Phyllis pursed her lips, thinking. Then she wrote something on a piece of paper and slid it across the counter. "A name and phone number. This is Pauline Dockery. She owns that old diner you were looking at. Lives in Florida now. Inherited it from her husband's family. Been trying to sell it for years, but nobody wants it. She might let you stay there a few nights if you promise to keep squatters out. Tell her Phyllis sent you." Theodore took the paper. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Place hasn't been open since 1987. You might prefer the truck." Outside, Devon looked at his father. "We're really going to ask if we can sleep in an abandoned building. You have a better idea?" Devon didn't. Theodore called the number from a payphone outside the post office. Mrs. Dockery sounded elderly and distracted, watching a game show in the background. She remembered the diner vaguely, seemed surprised anyone was interested in it. "You're not going to trash the place?" she asked. "No, ma'am. We're just looking for somewhere dry to sleep for a few days. I'm a contractor, was a contractor. I can make sure the building stays secure. Well, I suppose that's fine. Lord knows nobody else cares about it. Keys are supposed to be at the post office with Gerald. Tell him I said it's okay." Gerald Hutchins was a thin man in his 60s, with kind eyes and the slow, deliberate movements of someone who'd learned patience through necessity. He listened to Theodore's explanation, made his own call to confirm with Mrs. Dockery, then retrieved a key ring from a drawer. "Haven't opened that place in years," Gerald said. "Not sure what you'll find." "We'll manage," Theodore said. Gerald handed over the keys, then added, "You two need anything, you come find me. This town doesn't have much, but we take care of folks who need help." As they walked back to the diner, Devon said quietly, "People are nicer here than I expected." "Small towns," Theodore said. "They remember what it's like to need neighbors." Theodore unlocked the padlock and unwrapped the chain from the door handles. The lock was stiff, but the key turned. The door swung inward with a groan of hinges that hadn't moved in decades. The smell hit them first, dust and mildew and old grease, and something else, something like time itself, settled and still. Theodore found a light switch and flipped it, not expecting anything. But overhead fluorescence flickered and hummed before casting harsh light over the interior. The diner was frozen in 1987. Booths lined the windows, their red vinyl cracked and faded. A long counter ran down one side with round swivel stools, several missing their seats. Behind the counter, a kitchen was visible through a pass-through window. The walls were yellow, or had been once. Now they were the color of old newspapers. Photographs hung in frames, black and white images of the town in its prime, of the diner full of people, of a factory with smokestacks against a bright sky. Dust covered everything. The floor tiles were cracked. Water stains marked the ceiling, but the structure was sound. Theodore could see that immediately. The building had been waiting, patient as only buildings can be, for someone to care again. Devon stood in the doorway looking around. "This is where we're sleeping." "This is where we're staying," Theodore said, and heard the difference in his own words. They cleared a space in the back corner, swept away the worst of the dust, and laid out their sleeping bags. As night fell, they ate canned soup cold from the can, because there was no working stove yet, sitting on the floor with their backs against the wall. "Dad," Devon said after a long silence, "what are we doing?" "Getting through today," Theodore said. "That's all we can ever do." Devon was quiet for a while. Then, "I'm sorry I've been angry. You have every right to be. Not at you. You didn't know. I should have known. I should have been smarter. We both should have been." Devon set down his empty can. "So what happens tomorrow?" Theodore looked around the diner, seeing not what it was, but what it had been, what it could be. "Tomorrow we clean up a little. Make this place livable while we figure out our next move." But even as he said it, something else was forming in his mind. Not a plan exactly. More like a hope that he didn't dare speak aloud yet. They slept that night on the floor of a forgotten diner, two men who'd lost everything, in a town that had lost its purpose. Neither of them knew yet that they'd found exactly where they needed to be. Theodore woke before dawn, his body aching from sleeping on the hard floor. For a moment he didn't remember where he was. Then the smell of dust and old grease brought it back. The diner, Milldale, the end of the road. Beside him, Devon slept with one arm thrown over his face, the way he'd slept as a boy. Theodore stood carefully, not wanting to wake him, and walked through the dim diner. Early light filtered through cracks in the plywood covering the windows, creating thin bars of grey across the floor. He couldn't sleep. Hadn't been able to sleep properly in months. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the bank statements, the empty accounts, Roger's face promising everything would be fine. So instead of sleeping, Theodore did what he always did. He worked. He started in the kitchen, picking his way carefully through the darkness until he found another light switch. More fluorescence flickered to life, revealing a commercial kitchen that had been abandoned mid-shift. Pots still hung on hooks. Utensils filled drawers. A calendar on the wall showed October 1987, the last month anyone had cared enough to flip the page. The appliances were old but industrial grade, built to last. Theodore checked the gas lines. Shut off, thank God. No leaks after all these years. The water was off too. He'd need to turn those back on carefully, check for problems. But first he could clean. He found cleaning supplies in a storage closet, ancient bottles of cleaner, dried-out sponges, a mop with a rotted head. He worked with what he had, using old rags to wipe down surfaces, sweeping decades of dust into piles. The work was familiar, comforting. His hands knew what to do, even when his mind didn't. By the time Devon woke, Theodore had cleared a path through the kitchen and started on the storage room. That's where he found the coffee pot. It was an old percolator, the kind his father had used. Stainless steel, heavy, built before planned obsolescence. It sat on a shelf covered in dust but intact. Theodore carried it to the sink, turned on the water main carefully, and watched rusty water sputter from the faucet before running clear. He washed the percolator inside and out, examining each part. The basket was intact, the stem unbroken, the gasket old but not cracked. In the storage room, he found a sealed canister of coffee, years expired but vacuum-packed. He opened it. The smell was still there, slightly flat but recognizable. "What are you doing?" Devon stood in the kitchen doorway, hair standing up, looking young and lost. "Making coffee," Theodore said. "That thing hasn't worked in 40 years. Probably not." Theodore filled the percolator with water, measured in the coffee, assembled the parts. His hands moved with the muscle memory of 1,000 morning routines. He plugged it in, not expecting anything, but the heating element glowed red and the water began to warm. They stood together in silence, watching the percolator. After a few minutes it began to perk. That distinctive bubbling sound, coffee rising through the stem, spreading its color and smell through the chamber. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and dark and impossible. Theodore poured 2 cups into mugs he'd washed. The coffee was weak and slightly stale, but it was hot and it was real. Devon wrapped both hands around his mug, steam rising into his face. "How did you do that?" Devon asked quietly. "Just cleaned it." That's all it needed. They stood drinking coffee in an abandoned diner's kitchen as morning light grew stronger through the dirty windows. Theodore felt something shift inside him, small but definite. A simple thing had been broken and he'd fixed it. That was all. But somehow it mattered more than it should. A knock at the front door startled them both. Gerald Hutchins stood outside holding a paper bag. Theodore unlocked the door and let him in. "Saw the lights on," Gerald said. "Figured you boys might be hungry." He held up the bag. "Just some bread and eggs, basics." "That's kind of you," Theodore said. "We can pay." "Didn't ask you to pay. Just being neighborly." Gerald looked around the diner, his expression softening. "Lord, I haven't been in here in years. Used to come every Saturday morning. Their hash browns were the best I ever had." "When did it close?" Devon asked. "October '87. Factory closed that summer. Textile mill. Employed half the town. Once that went, people started leaving. Diner held on a few months, but without customers there was no point." Gerald walked slowly through the space, touching a booth, the counter, seeing ghosts. "My wife and I had our first date here. I was 19, scared to death. Ordered the most expensive thing on the menu to impress her, a burger and a milkshake." He smiled at the memory. "Didn't have enough money to tip. The owner, Mr. Dockery, he saw and slipped me $1. I said every young man deserves a chance to impress a girl properly." Theodore listened, watching the old man's face. This wasn't just a building. It was a repository of lives lived, moments that mattered. "What happened to everyone?" Theodore asked. "The people who worked here?" "Scattered. Most of the young folks left for cities. The old ones stayed because they didn't know anywhere else. We're down to about 800 people now. Used to be 3,000. Gerald looked at Theodore. "You thinking of fixing this place up?" "I don't know what I'm thinking," Theodore said honestly. "Well, you got coffee working." "That's a start." Gerald headed for the door, then paused. "You need anything, you come find me at the post office. And welcome to Milldale for whatever that's worth." After Gerald left, Theodore and Devon stood looking at the bag of groceries. "We can't stay here," Devon said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Why not?" "Because it's not ours. Because we're homeless, Dad. We can't just fix up some random building and pretend we have a life. We have to be somewhere. Somewhere with a plan. Somewhere that leads to something." Theodore heard the fear underneath his son's words. Devon was 28 years old, and his father had destroyed his future. Every day they spent like this was a day Devon could have been rebuilding his own life instead of watching his father's fall apart. "You could leave," Theodore said quietly. Take what money we have left, get to a city, find work. You don't have to stay with me." Devon's face hardened. "Is that what you want?" "I want you to have a future." "Then stop talking about me leaving." Devon grabbed the bag of groceries and started pulling out items: eggs, bread, a small container of butter. "You want to fix this place up? Fine, but we do it right. We make a plan. We figure out what's actually possible instead of just cleaning randomly." Theodore nodded slowly. "Okay, and we start by making breakfast. Real breakfast, not coffee and sadness." Devon found a skillet and Theodore turned on the stove, a gas range that ignited after a few tries. They cooked eggs and toast together, working side by side the way they had in Theodore's old kitchen when Devon was young, before college, before everything got complicated. The eggs were perfect, simple, honest, made with care. They ate, standing at the counter, looking out at the empty diner. "We could clean the windows," Devon said. "Let some light in. We could fix that broken booth. Check the bathroom. Make sure the plumbing works." They were making a list without meaning to, finding purpose in the possibilities. Theodore looked at his son, saw the same thing he felt reflected there. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. The willingness to try, the understanding that doing something, anything, was better than doing nothing. "Your grandfather used to say, 'If you can make something with your hands, you're never truly poor,'" Theodore said. "We're still pretty damn poor, Dad, but we're making something." Devon smiled slightly. The first real smile Theodore had seen in months. "We're making breakfast in an abandoned diner. That's not exactly a business plan. It's a start," Theodore said. And somehow, impossibly it was, the work began simply. Theodore couldn't help himself. 30 years of being a contractor meant he saw problems that needed fixing everywhere he looked. A broken door hinge, cracked window panes, loose floor tiles. His hands itched to repair things, to make them right again. Devon resisted at first. "We're just staying here temporarily," he said. "We don't need to renovate the whole place." But Theodore was already measuring a window frame, his father's old level in hand. Might as well make it livable. Within 2 days, they'd established a rhythm. Mornings were for cleaning, sweeping, scrubbing, removing years of accumulated grime. Afternoons were for repairs. Theodore worked with what they had, salvaging materials from broken furniture to fix other pieces. Devon kept a notebook, tracking what they did each day. At first, the notebook was practical. A list of repairs completed, materials needed, areas still requiring work. But gradually it became something more. Devon started sketching, drawing ideas for how spaces could be arranged, how the flow of the diner might work if it were actually operating. He didn't show these sketches to his father, but Theodore saw them anyway and said nothing, not wanting to break whatever fragile hope was building between them. Gerald returned on the 3rd day with more supplies, cleaning products, a toolbox full of spare parts, sandpaper and paintbrushes. "Can't have you working with nothing," he said, setting everything on the counter. "These are extras from my garage." "Gerald, we can't accept. You're keeping the building from falling apart." "Call it payment from Mrs. Dockery." Gerald looked around at the visible progress. Clean windows, swept floors, repaired booths. "You two work fast." "Not much else to do," Devon said. That afternoon, a woman appeared at the window, peering through the glass. She was elderly, perhaps 70, with white hair pulled back and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Theodore opened the door. "Can I help you?" "I live across the street," she said. "I'm Beatrice Sheridan. I've been watching you clean this place for 3 days, and I figured it was time to introduce myself properly." She held out a covered dish. "Brought you some casserole." "You can't live on eggs and coffee." Theodore accepted the dish, still warm. The smell made his stomach growl. "That's very kind. I'm Theodore Hale. This is my son Devon." Beatrice stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her eyes sweeping over the space. "My lord," she said softly, "I haven't been in here since it closed. I taught high school English for 40 years, and I used to come here every Friday after school. Mr. Dockery would save me the corner booth and bring coffee without asking." She walked to that corner booth, running her hand over the cracked vinyl. "I had my first date with my husband here. Stanley, he passed 10 years ago. He was so nervous he spilled his water twice. She smiled at the memory. The waitress Betty, she was so sweet about it, brought him a fresh glass and winked at me like we were in on a secret together. Theodore watched her, understanding better now what Gerald had tried to explain. This wasn't just a building. It was the geography of people's lives, the setting where their stories had unfolded. "We're just fixing it up a bit," Devon said. "While we're staying here." "And then what?" Beatrice asked. Devon didn't have an answer. Beatrice left them with the casserole and a bag of cleaning supplies. Good ones, not the half-empty bottles they'd been using. "You need anything, I'm in the White House directly across the street. And if you're going to be here a while, you should probably introduce yourselves to Phyllis properly. She runs the only grocery store, and she knows everything that happens in this town." After she left, Devon and Theodore ate the casserole sitting at the counter. It was chicken and rice, perfectly seasoned, made with care. "People keep giving us things," Devon said. "Small town," Theodore replied. "They take care of each other. We're not part of the town. We're just passing through." But even as Devon said it, Theodore could hear the uncertainty. Were they still passing through? They'd been here almost a week now. They'd established routines, made progress, started to know people's names. The next morning, Theodore started on the counter. The surface was scarred and stained, but underneath was solid wood. He began sanding, working methodically, the way his father had taught him. Devon joined him after breakfast, and they worked in companionable silence, the rasp of sandpaper the only sound. "Dad," Devon said after a while, "what are we doing here?" "Really?" Theodore kept sanding. "I don't know. We can't stay forever. We don't own this place. We don't have jobs. We have maybe $20 left." "I know. So what's the plan?" Theodore set down his sandpaper and looked at his son. "The plan is to keep doing what's in front of us. That's all I've got right now." "That's not a plan. That's just avoiding reality." "Maybe." Theodore picked up the sandpaper again. "But reality's been pretty hard lately. Maybe avoiding it for a little while isn't the worst thing." Devon was quiet for a long time. "Then this counter, it's like the one Grandpa built. In your first house." Theodore's hands stilled. He'd been thinking the same thing, hadn't realized Devon would remember. "You were only 6 when we sold that house. I remember sitting at it watching Grandpa work. He'd let me help sand it. He did. He'd tell these long stories while we worked. I didn't understand half of them, but I loved listening anyway." Theodore felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. He said working with your hands gave you time to think. That the repetitive motion freed up your mind for what really mattered. "What really mattered?" Devon asked. "People, relationships, the stuff you can't hold but can't live without." They returned to sanding, the rhythm of it soothing. Theodore thought about his father, about the lessons he'd tried to pass down, about how he'd tried to pass those same lessons to Devon and whether he'd succeeded or just failed in a different way. That evening, Devon stayed up late with his notebook. Theodore pretended to sleep, but watched his son sketching by flashlight. The drawings were detailed now, booth arrangements, kitchen layouts, even menu ideas. Devon was planning something, though he wouldn't admit it yet. The next day brought more visitors. Otto Vandenberg, a handyman in his 50s, arrived with spare plumbing parts. "Heard you might need these," he said, and stayed to help Theodore repair the bathroom. Florence Drummond, the high school principal, came by with 3 students who needed community service hours. They spent the afternoon washing windows and clearing debris from the back lot. With each person who helped, the diner became more real. The windows let in light now. The booths were patched and stable. The counter gleamed with fresh sanding. You could almost imagine it as a functioning restaurant, almost see people sitting and talking and living their lives here. On Sunday, Theodore and Devon worked on the front door. The wood was solid, but the hinges were rusted through. They removed the door carefully, carried it to the parking lot, and began the meticulous work of stripping, sanding, and refinishing. "I used to be angry at you," Devon said suddenly, "when everything fell apart. They blamed you for being stupid, for trusting Roger." Theodore kept sanding. "You had every right to be angry. I was angrier at myself. I saw the red flags too. I knew something felt wrong about that deal, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to question you. Devon's hand stilled. We both made mistakes. We did. So maybe we both deserve a chance to make something better. Theodore looked at his son, seeing not the boy he'd raised but the man he'd become, thoughtful, capable, willing to forgive. Maybe we do, Theodore said quietly. They finished the door as the sun set, rehung it with new hinges Otto had provided, and watched it swing smooth and true. It was a small thing, just a door, just repairs. But it felt like more than that. It felt like a beginning. Theodore found the jukebox on a Tuesday morning, hidden beneath a canvas tarp in the corner near the restrooms. He pulled the cover away and revealed a Wurlitzer from the early 1960s, chrome and colored glass, curved and elegant, a piece of art as much as a machine. "Devon, come look at this!" His son emerged from the kitchen where he'd been checking the gas lines. When he saw the jukebox, his face lit up. "Is that real?" "Looks like it." Theodore crouched down, examining the mechanism through the glass front. Records still sat in their slots, visible through the curved window. Probably hasn't played since the place closed. Can we fix it? Theodore smiled at the we. A week ago, Devon had been resistant to fixing anything. Now he was asking about repairing a jukebox. We can try. They spent the morning carefully disassembling the machine, laying out parts on a clean towel like surgeons. The mechanism was intricate. Gears and levers, electrical contacts and mechanical selectors. Theodore worked slowly, methodically, while Devon took notes on how everything fit together. The belt that drove the turntable had rotted away completely. The needle was broken. Several electrical contacts were corroded, but the motor still turned, and the records themselves, protected inside their glass case, looked playable. "We need parts," Devon said, studying his notes. "Otto might have something. Or we could try the hardware store. Is there one still open?" "I saw one 2 blocks over. Looked pretty dusty, but the sign said open." They walked to Milldale Hardware, a narrow storefront squeezed between 2 empty buildings. Inside, the aisles were crammed with inventory that looked like it had been there for decades. The owner, a man in his 70s named Horace, emerged from the back. "Help you, gentlemen?" Theodore explained what they needed. Horace listened, then disappeared into the back room. He returned with a box of old belts, various sizes, and a collection of needles for record players. "Been holding on to these for 30 years, Horace said. "Figured someday somebody might need them. Take what works." $5 for the lot. Theodore counted out 5 precious dollars from their dwindling cash. As Horace made change, he asked, "You're the fellows fixing up the old diner." "Word travels fast. Word's about all we got for entertainment around here." Horace smiled. "Folks are curious. We've seen plenty of empty buildings, but nobody's tried to bring one back to life before." Back at the diner, they spent the afternoon installing the belt and replacing the needle. Devon cleaned each electrical contact with fine sandpaper, while Theodore adjusted the mechanical selector. The work required patience and precision, exactly the kind of task that made time disappear. By late afternoon, they were ready to test it. Theodore plugged it in, selected a record at random, and pressed the button. Nothing happened. Devon's face fell. Theodore checked the connections, adjusted the belt tension, tried again. Still nothing. "Maybe the motor's dead," Devon said. "Maybe." Theodore sat back, frustrated. They'd spent hours on this, and for what? They didn't need a jukebox. They needed jobs, money, a future. This was just a distraction from... The motor hummed to life. The mechanical arm moved, selected a record, lifted it, placed it on the turntable. The record began to spin. The needle dropped. Sam Cooke's voice filled the empty diner, warm and hopeful. "Don't know much about history, don't know much biology." Theodore and Devon stood frozen, listening. The sound was scratchy but clear, and impossibly miraculously beautiful. Music in a place that had been silent for decades. Devon started laughing, actual genuine laughter. Theodore felt his own chest loosen, something heavy lifting. They'd made something work. They'd brought sound back to silence. The front door opened. Beatrice stood there, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "I heard it from across the street," she whispered. "I heard the music." She walked into the diner like someone entering a church, her steps slow and reverent. When Sam Cooke finished, she said, "Play another one, please." Theodore selected another record. This time it was Patsy Cline, "Crazy," and Beatrice closed her eyes, swaying slightly. "Stanley and I danced to this song," she said, "right here in this diner. It was raining outside, and we were the only customers, and Mr. Dockery played this for us." She opened her eyes. "I haven't heard it in 20 years. She began to dance, alone in the empty space, her movements slow and practiced. Theodore watched, understanding that they'd done more than repair a machine. They'd opened a door to memory, to lives lived, to moments that mattered. By evening, word had spread. Gerald came by, then Phyllis from the grocery store. Stanley Wallace, the Korean War veteran, arrived with 2 friends. They stood around the jukebox like it was a miracle, taking turns selecting songs, sharing memories attached to each one. "This was our song," Gerald said when Unchained Melody played. "My wife's favorite. She passed 4 years ago." Florence Drummond brought her sister Iris, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a quick smile. Iris looked around the diner with professional interest. "This place has good bones," she said to Devon. "You've done remarkable work." "It's mostly my dad," Devon said. "He's the one who knows what he's doing. But you're the one keeping track, planning ahead." She nodded toward his notebook, visible on the counter. "That's important too." They talked while music played and older folks shared stories. Iris was a nurse at the county hospital, practical and straightforward. She asked about their plans, and Devon found himself being honest. They didn't have any, not really. They were just staying here, fixing things, trying to figure out what came next. "Sometimes that's enough," Iris said. "Just showing up and doing the work in front of you." As the evening wound down and people left, Theodore stood at the counter watching Devon talk with Iris by the door. His son looked lighter than he had in months, animated, present in a way he hadn't been since everything fell apart. Beatrice approached Theodore quietly. "You've given us something precious," she said. "This town's been dying for so long. We forgot what it felt like to have something worth gathering for. It's just a jukebox." "No, dear. It's a heartbeat. This place had one once and now it does again, because of you." She patted his hand. "Don't underestimate what that means." After everyone left, Theodore and Devon sat at the counter in the quiet diner. The jukebox stood silent now, but the air still felt charged with music. "People really care about this place," Devon said. "They do. What happens when we have to leave?" Theodore didn't have an answer. They couldn't stay forever in a building they didn't own, surviving on charity and goodwill. Eventually, reality would intrude. Eventually, they'd have to face their situation honestly. But not tonight. "Let's just get through tomorrow," Theodore said. "That's all we can ever really do." Devon nodded slowly. He opened his notebook and began writing, not notes about repairs this time, but something else. Theodore saw sketches of menu items, calculations of costs, ideas for operating hours. His son was planning something, building something in his mind before committing it to words. Theodore left him to it and walked to the jukebox, running his hand over the smooth chrome. His father had always said that work was prayer, that creating something good was its own justification. Maybe he'd been right. Outside, Milldale slept under a clear November sky. Inside the riverside diner, 2 men sat with their separate thoughts, brought together by loss and held together by the work of their hands. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new uncertainties. But tonight, they'd made music play where there had been only silence. And that was enough. The morning after the jukebox came to life, Theodore found something else in a storage drawer. An old, leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and fragile. He opened it carefully and discovered it was a guest book, filled with signatures and messages dating back to the 1950s. "Happy anniversary, love you always. Best pie in 3 counties. Johnny's 10th birthday, he ate 3 pieces of cake. Simple messages, ordinary lives, documented in fading ink. Theodore spent an hour reading through it, touching the past through the handwriting of people long gone or moved away. These were the moments people chose to preserve. Celebrations, milestones, simple joy. The diner had been the backdrop for countless lives. He placed the book near the entrance with a handwritten note, "Sign in. Be part of the story." That afternoon, Gerald arrived with 3 other men, all carrying tools. "Heard you might need some help with the bigger repairs," he said. "Boys, this is Theodore and Devon. Theodore, Devon, this is Otto, Stanley, and Horace." Otto, the handyman who donated plumbing parts, stepped forward. "That back door needs replacing. Got one in my garage that'll fit." Within an hour, they were all working, replacing the door, patching the roof where it sagged, fixing the cracked tiles Theodore and Devon hadn't been able to manage alone. The work went faster with more hands, and the conversation flowed easily. Stanley, the veteran, told stories about working at the textile mill. 42 years on the floor, he said. Started at 18, retired at 60. Week later, they closed the whole operation. Moved production overseas where labor was cheaper. That's when the town started emptying out, Horace added. Young people left first, looking for work. Then families? Now it's mostly us old folks, too stubborn or too broke to leave. Theodore understood that particular kind of stuck. Sometimes staying wasn't a choice but a circumstance. By evening, the diner looked better than it had in decades. The roof was solid, the doors secure, the worst structural issues addressed. The men stood back, admiring their work with the quiet satisfaction of people who knew their craft. "You planning to open this place?" Stanley asked. Theodore hesitated. "I don't know. We're just staying here temporarily." "Shame," Otto said. "Town could use a gathering spot, somewhere besides the grocery store parking lot." After they left, Devon approached his father. "They're right. We should think about actually opening. Devon, we can't run a restaurant. We don't have money, equipment, supplies, or any idea what we're doing. We could start small. Breakfast only, limited menu." Devon pulled out his notebook, showed pages of calculations. "I've been working on this. If we can get basic supplies on credit from Phyllis, if we keep the menu simple, if we charge fair prices, if is doing a lot of work in those sentences. Everything's an if. Dad, that's all life is, a series of gambles on uncertain outcomes." Devon's voice was intense. "But at least this is a gamble where we're building something instead of just surviving day to day." Theodore wanted to say yes, wanted to believe they could make this work. But he'd believed before. Believed Roger, believed the investment would pay off, believed he could protect his son from hardship. He'd been wrong about everything. "Let me think about it," he said. That night, Theodore sat alone in the diner after Devon had gone to sleep. He held his father's photograph, a small black-and-white image kept in his wallet, creased and worn from years of carrying. It showed William Hale standing in front of a small house, his first solo construction project, pride evident in his stance. Theodore had been 12 when that photo was taken. His father had let him help with the trim work, teaching him to measure twice and cut once, to take pride in precision. William had built a good business, provided for his family, retired with dignity. Theodore had lost everything. The weight of that failure pressed down on him in the darkness. He'd taken his son's savings, his son's future, and gambled it away on a conman's promises. Now Devon wanted to gamble again, wanted to believe they could build something from nothing in a dying town with no prospects. What if they failed? What if this was just another mistake, another dream that would crumble? Movement near the stairs made him look up. Devon stood there in his sleeping bag, watching. "Can't sleep?" Devon asked. "Just thinking." Devon came and sat beside him. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Devon said, "I know you're scared." "I'm terrified," Theodore admitted, "of failing you again. You didn't fail me. I lost everything we had. The business failed." "There's a difference." Devon turned to face him. "Dad, I've been angry. I've been frustrated and scared and resentful. But I've never thought you failed me as a father." Theodore felt his throat tighten. "You taught me to work with my hands," Devon continued. "You taught me that honest labor has dignity, that building something matters, that showing up every day is its own kind of success. Those lessons didn't disappear when the money did. But the money mattered. Security matters. It does. But so does this." Devon gestured around the diner. "So does having a purpose, being part of something, mattering to people. We've been here 2 weeks, and already people are showing up, helping, caring about what happens to this place. That's not nothing. Theodore looked at his son, seeing the man who'd emerged from loss, stronger, clearer, more certain than Theodore felt himself. What if we fail? Theodore asked quietly. Then we fail. But at least we'll have tried to build something good. Devon smiled slightly. You taught me that too. That trying matters. Theodore felt something shift inside him. The fear didn't disappear, but it made room for something else. Hope, maybe, or just the willingness to take one more risk. Okay, he said. Let's do it. Let's try to open this place. Devon's smile widened. Really? Small scale. Breakfast only. 3 days a week to start. We'll need help, lots of it, and it might not work. It might not work, Devon agreed. But it might. They stayed up late making plans. Devon showed his calculations, his menu ideas, his timeline. Theodore added his contractor's perspective. What repairs were still needed, what equipment they could salvage, what would need to be purchased or borrowed. By dawn, they had something resembling a plan. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but possible. That morning, Beatrice arrived early. Theodore showed her the guest book, explained his idea of making it active again. Beautiful, she said, signing her name with a careful hand. Beatrice Sheridan, November 2024. Still here. Still hoping. Word spread through the small network of people who cared. Phyllis came by at lunch, listened to their plan, and nodded slowly. I'll front you supplies on credit. Pay me when you can. Florence brought donation jars from the high school. Students want to help. They've never seen anyone fight for something in this town before. Iris stopped by after her shift, bringing coffee and practical suggestions about health codes and permits. I'll help however I can, she told Devon, and something in the way they looked at each other made Theodore feel both hopeful and slightly melancholy. By evening, the diner had 5 new signatures in the guest book. Each one was a promise, a commitment, a belief that something good could still happen here. Theodore locked up that night feeling lighter than he had in months. The fear was still there, the uncertainty, the awareness of how much could go wrong. But there was also work to do. People who believed in them, and a son who'd found his purpose again. That had to be worth the risk. The doubt came back 3 days later, in the darkest hours before dawn. Theodore sat alone in the diner, his father's photograph in his hands, unable to sleep. They'd been planning, organizing, accepting help and donations. Devon was energized in a way Theodore hadn't seen in years. The community was rallying behind them. Everything was moving forward. And Theodore was terrified. He stared at his father's face in the old photograph, William Hale at 40, standing proud in front of his work. His father had never failed at anything. Built a steady business, raised his family, retired comfortably. He'd handed Theodore the tools, the knowledge, the example of what success looked like. And Theodore had destroyed it all. Not just his own success, but his son's future. Devon had been working as an accountant, had his own apartment, a girlfriend, a life trajectory that made sense. Then Theodore had called, desperate, needing help. And Devon had come, had invested his savings, had given up everything to support his father. Now Theodore was asking him to believe again. To invest not money this time, but hope, effort, faith in another uncertain venture. What if it failed? What if they put their hearts into this diner and it collapsed like everything else? What if Theodore was just a man who destroyed everything he touched? The photograph blurred as tears came. Theodore didn't try to stop them. In the darkness alone, he let himself feel the full weight of his failure, his shame, his fear that he was leading his son into another disaster. Dad, Theodore looked up. Devon stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the grey pre-dawn light. What are you doing up? Theodore wiped his eyes, trying to hide the evidence of tears. Devon came and sat beside him. He saw the photograph, understood without asking. For a long time, they sat in silence. Finally, Devon spoke. I need to tell you something. About the business deal with Roger. Theodore tensed. I saw the red flags, Devon said quietly. When you showed me the paperwork, when you asked me to invest, I saw things that didn't add up. The timeline was too fast. The permit seemed incomplete. Roger kept changing details. Devon, let me finish. Devon's voice was firm. I saw the problems, and I didn't say anything. I told myself you knew better than me. You were the experienced one, the business owner. Who was I to question you? Theodore stared at his son. But that wasn't really why I stayed quiet, Devon continued. The truth is, I wanted to believe. You were so excited, so hopeful about securing our futures. And I thought, maybe this is how I prove I'm a man to my father. By trusting him, by supporting his vision, by investing my money alongside his. You were trying to show faith in me. I was trying to be your son, your partner, your equal. Devon's voice cracked slightly. And when it all fell apart, I blamed you because it was easier than admitting I'd failed too. That I'd been weak, that I'd ignored my own instincts because I wanted your approval more than I wanted to be right. Theodore felt something break open in his chest. You don't need to apologize. I was the adult. I was the one who should have been careful. We both should have been careful. We both made mistakes. Devon turned to face him. But Dad, we can't spend the rest of our lives paralyzed by fear of making another one. What if I fail you again? What if you don't? Devon's eyes were clear, certain. What if we actually build something good here? What if we give this town a place to gather, give ourselves a purpose, give each other a chance to be proud again? It's such a risk. Everything's a risk. Staying in the truck was a risk. Coming to this town was a risk. Fixing up this diner was a risk. And every single one of those risks led us to something better than where we were. Theodore looked around the diner, at the clean windows, the repaired booths, the working jukebox, at the guest book with its growing collection of new signatures, at all the evidence of people caring, helping, believing in something. I'm so scared, he whispered. I know. Me too. Devon put his hand on his father's shoulder. But I'd rather be scared and trying than scared and doing nothing. The words settled between them. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten, not sunrise yet, but the promise of it. The darkness giving way to something new. Theodore took a deep breath. Okay, no more doubting. We commit to this. We try with everything we have. Everything we have, Devon agreed. As morning broke, they made a practical plan. Theodore would handle the kitchen repairs and cooking. Devon would manage the finances, supplies, and operations. They'd open for breakfast only, Friday through Sunday, 3 days a week. Limited menu: eggs, toast, hash browns, pancakes, coffee. Simple food made well. Phyllis came by at 8 with their first delivery of supplies. Eggs, flour, butter, coffee, bacon. Paid on trust, she said. Pay me back when you can. Gerald arrived with a donation, $50 from the Postal Workers Union. Not much, but we wanted to help. Beatrice showed up with plates and mugs from her own kitchen. These were our everyday dishes. They deserved to be used. Otto brought a repaired coffee maker, commercial grade, built to last. Found it in my garage. Got it working again. Florence came with her sister Iris, both carrying boxes. Silverware from the school cafeteria, Florence explained. They were replacing everything. This stuff still works fine. Iris lingered after Florence left, helping Devon organize the kitchen. Theodore watched them work together. The careful way they moved around each other, the quick smiles, the easy conversation. Something was growing there, gentle and hopeful. Your son's a good man, Beatrice said quietly, appearing beside Theodore. He is, better than me. Different than you, maybe, but not better. She patted his arm. You taught him well. He learned how to work hard, how to care about quality, how to show up even when things are difficult. Those are your lessons living in him. Theodore felt his throat tighten again, but this time with something other than fear. By afternoon, they had everything they needed. The kitchen was clean and functional. The dining room was ready. They had supplies, equipment, a menu board that Devon had lettered in careful chalk script. They set an opening date 3 weeks away, Friday, December 1st. Time enough to prepare, to spread the word, to make sure everything was ready. That evening, Theodore and Devon painted the menu board together, listing their simple offerings. As they worked, Devon said, even if this only lasts a few months, it'll be worth it. It will, Theodore agreed. And Dad, thank you. For what? For not giving up. For letting me be part of this. For showing me that starting over doesn't mean forgetting everything that came before. Theodore set down his brush and pulled his son into an embrace. They stood there in the diner they were building together, holding on to each other and the fragile hope they'd constructed from nothing but work and will. Outside, Milldale settled into evening. Inside the riverside diner, two men stood together, ready to face whatever came next. Not fearless, but no longer paralyzed by fear. That was enough. 1 week before opening day, Theodore was repainting the trim around the front windows when a silver sedan pulled up to the curb. A man in his 40s emerged, wearing a suit that looked expensive and out of place in Milldale. He carried a leather briefcase and walked with the confidence of someone accustomed to being listened to. "Theodore Hale," the man called out. Theodore climbed down from the ladder, wiping paint from his hands. "That's me. Preston Ashby. I'm an attorney representing the Dockery estate." He pulled a business card from his pocket. "Is there somewhere we can talk?" Devon appeared in the doorway, sensing trouble. "What's this about?" "Perhaps we should discuss this inside." They sat in a booth, Theodore and Devon on one side, the lawyer on the other. Preston Ashby opened his briefcase and removed a folder of documents. "I'll get straight to the point," he said. "Mrs. Pauline Dockery did not have legal authority to grant you permission to occupy this property." Theodore felt the floor drop away beneath him. "What do you mean?" Devon asked, his voice tight. "The property was part of her late husband's trust. There's been a dispute among the heirs for the past 8 years regarding ownership and distribution of assets. That dispute was recently resolved through litigation." He slid a document across the table. "The rightful heir is Charles Dockery, Mrs. Pauline's nephew. He won the case 3 weeks ago." Theodore stared at the legal document, the words swimming before his eyes. "She said she owned it. She gave us permission. She believed she had that authority. She was mistaken." Preston's tone was professional but not unkind. "Mr. Dockery has plans to sell the property. He's already in negotiations with a regional development company. The sale should close within 30 days. 30 days, Devon repeated numbly. "I'm sorry. I know you've invested time and effort here. But you have no legal claim to the property, and Mr. Dockery is within his rights to proceed with the sale." "What about Mrs. Dockery?" Theodore asked. "She told us she's elderly and somewhat confused about the legal situation. The family has been trying to handle these matters without upsetting her." Preston gathered his documents. "You'll need to vacate the premises. Mr. Dockery is willing to give you 2 weeks to make arrangements." After the lawyer left, Theodore and Devon sat in stunned silence. Everything they'd built, everything they'd planned, the community's investment, the hope they'd created, all of it was built on ground that was never theirs to stand on. "We have to tell people," Devon finally said. Word spread through Milldale with the speed of disaster. By evening, the diner was filled with people. Gerald, Beatrice, Phyllis, Otto, Stanley, Florence, Iris, Horace. They crowded into booths and stood along the counter, their faces showing shock, anger, confusion. "There has to be something we can do," Gerald said. "Legal recourse, some kind of claim. We have no legal standing," Theodore said quietly. "We were squatting, essentially. We didn't pay rent. We don't have a lease. We have no rights to the property." "What about buying it?" Phyllis suggested. "If this Charles Dockery wants to sell, why can't we buy it?" "The development company is offering $200,000, Devon said. "We have 8,000 in the donation jar." "It's not even close." The number settled over the group like a weight. $200,000 might as well have been $2 million for a town like Milldale. "We could fundraise," Florence said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Reach out to former residents, apply for grants in 30 days. Otto shook his head. "Not possible." Stanley stood up, his face angry. "So we just give up? Let some development company come in and build another chain restaurant nobody needs? What choice do we have?" Theodore asked, and heard the defeat in his own voice. Beatrice had been quiet until now. She stood slowly, her elderly frame somehow commanding attention. "We can't save the building," she said. "But maybe we can save what it represents." Everyone turned to look at her. "We've been planning an opening for December 1st. That's 7 days away." Her voice was steady, certain. "Let's open anyway, one day. One perfect gathering before it's gone. What's the point?" someone asked. The point is dignity, Beatrice said firmly. The point is showing ourselves and this town that we're still capable of creating something beautiful, even if it's temporary. The point is not letting this place die without celebration. Theodore felt tears, threatening again. The futility of it seemed crushing, all that work for one day. But Devon spoke up. She's right. We didn't do this to own property. We did it to build something that mattered, to give people a place to gather. That matters whether it's for one day or 1 year. It's just delaying the inevitable, Theodore said. All of life is delaying the inevitable, Dad. Devon's eyes were bright with determination. But the delay is where we actually live. That's where everything that matters happens. The group began to rally around the idea. They'd open on schedule. They'd make it perfect. They'd fill the diner with food and music and laughter. One last time, the Riverside Diner would be what it was meant to be. A gathering place, a community heart. People volunteered immediately. Phyllis would donate food. Otto would finish the last repairs. Florence would bring decorations. Stanley and his veteran friends would help with setup. Iris offered to work as a waitress alongside Beatrice. As the meeting broke up and people left with renewed purpose, Theodore sat alone at the counter. Devon found him there staring at nothing. "You okay?" Devon asked. "I don't know." Theodore's voice was hollow. "This was supposed to be our new start, our redemption, and it's just another failure. It's not a failure. We're losing everything again." "No," Devon sat beside him. "We're losing a building. That's all it ever was, a building. What we built was something else." Theodore looked at his son, not understanding. "Look around," Devon said. 2 weeks ago, this town was dying quietly. People isolated in their own grief about what they'd lost. Now they're organizing, helping each other, fighting for something. That's not because of the building. That's because of what we showed them was possible." "What's possible? Temporary hope?" "All hope is temporary, Dad. That's what makes it brave." Devon put his hand on his father's shoulder. "We came here with nothing. We're leaving with friends, with purpose, with proof that we can build something beautiful, even when everything's uncertain. That's not nothing." Theodore wanted to believe him, wanted to see this as anything other than another dream collapsing. But the weight of loss was so familiar, so heavy. "I'm tired of failing," he whispered. "Then don't fail this time. Make opening day perfect. Give these people something to remember. Show them, show yourself, that you can finish what you started with grace and dignity." Devon left him alone with that thought. Theodore sat in the quiet diner, surrounded by all the work they'd done, and tried to find the strength to face one more ending with dignity. Outside, Milldale prepared for a celebration and a farewell. Inside, a man sat with his doubts and tried to remember why trying mattered. The week before opening became a blur of purposeful activity. Theodore threw himself into preparation with an intensity that surprised even Devon. If this was going to be their only day, their one chance to show what the Riverside Diner could be, then it would be perfect. Every morning, Theodore arrived before dawn to work in the kitchen. He tested recipes, timing each dish until he could execute it flawlessly. Scrambled eggs that were creamy and soft, hash browns with crispy edges, pancakes that were golden and fluffy, toast buttered while still hot. Simple food, but made with precision and care. Devon worked beside him, not cooking but organizing, creating systems for orders, managing the flow from kitchen to dining room, calculating how many people they could serve in a day without overwhelming their limited resources. "We need a signature dish," Devon said one morning. "Something people will remember." Theodore thought about it. "My father used to make cinnamon rolls on special occasions. From scratch. They took hours, but they were worth it. Can you make them?" "I haven't in 20 years. Try." Theodore spent 2 days perfecting the recipe from memory, the dough kneaded until it was silky, the cinnamon and sugar distributed evenly, the cream cheese frosting made fresh. The first batch burned, the second was too dense, the third was close, the fourth was perfect. When Devon tasted one, his eyes closed in recognition. Grandpa's recipe. Close enough. "It's perfect, Dad." The community mobilized with remarkable efficiency. Otto finished installing a new water heater, ensuring they'd have hot water for dishes all day. Horace donated additional plates and mugs from the hardware store's old inventory. Stanley and his veteran friends built a serving station near the kitchen window, allowing Beatrice and Iris to pick up orders efficiently. Florence brought her students to deep clean every surface. They scrubbed floors, polished windows, wiped down every booth and table until everything gleamed. The teenagers worked with the earnest intensity of young people who'd never seen adults fight for something in their town before. "This matters to them," Florence told Theodore. "You've shown them that caring about something isn't naive or pointless. That's a gift." Phyllis arrived with 3 large boxes of supplies: coffee, flour, eggs, bacon, everything they needed. When Theodore tried to discuss payment, she waved him off. "Consider it my investment in one perfect day." Iris spent her evenings after nursing shifts helping Devon create a menu board. They worked together easily now, their growing affection evident in small gestures, the way she steadied the board while he wrote. How he made sure she had coffee always within reach, the comfortable silences between them. One evening, Theodore overheard them talking as he worked in the kitchen. "After this is over, what will you do?" Iris asked Devon. "I don't know." "Find work somewhere. Keep moving. You could stay. Milldale needs people who care. There's nothing here for us. No jobs, no future. There's community. That's something." Devon was quiet for a moment. "It is. But my dad and we can't just live on goodwill forever." Theodore understood the truth in those words. One perfect day wouldn't change their circumstances. They'd still be homeless, broke, without prospects. But he kept working anyway, perfecting recipes, preparing for a day that would end with goodbye. Beatrice arrived 3 days before opening with an old photograph. It showed the diner in 1962, packed with people, the booths full, the counter lined with customers. Everyone looked happy, engaged, alive. "I want you to see what it was," she said. "What you're bringing back, even if just for a day." Theodore studied the photograph. The faces of people long gone, the vitality of a thriving community, the simple joy of a place where people belonged. He pinned it to the kitchen wall, where he could see it while working. "We'll honor this," he promised. The night before opening, the core group gathered for a final walkthrough. Theodore and Devon led them through the preparations, where food would be stored, how orders would flow, where people would be seated, what music would play. Every detail had been considered. "It's beautiful," Gerald said, looking around. "It's exactly what it should be." They tested the jukebox one more time. Sam Cooke's voice filled the diner again, and for a moment everyone was quiet, feeling the weight of what they'd accomplished together. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Otto said, "you two did something remarkable. You took a dead building and gave it life again. You reminded us what we're capable of when we work together. We couldn't have done it without all of you," Theodore said. "That's the point," Beatrice replied. "None of us could have done it alone. But together, we built something that matters." After everyone left, Theodore and Devon stood in the empty diner, making final preparations. Devon checked supplies one more time. Theodore cleaned surfaces that were already clean. Neither wanted to stop working, to face the reality that tomorrow would be both triumph and ending. "Dad," Devon said finally, "no matter what happens, I want you to know. This meant everything to me. Not the diner, but doing this with you. Remembering what it feels like to build something together." Theodore felt his chest tighten. "You gave me a reason to keep going. After everything fell apart, you stayed. You believed we could do this." "We did do it." They embraced, holding each other in the quiet diner. Two men who'd lost everything and built something beautiful from the wreckage. "Tomorrow's going to be good," Devon said. "It is." Theodore stayed up after Devon fell asleep, walking through the diner one last time. He touched the counter they'd sanded together, the booths they'd repaired, the jukebox they'd brought back to life. He read through the guest book, looking at all the names, old signatures from decades past, new ones from people who'd helped them. He added his own entry. "Theodore Hale, November 2024. I came here with nothing and found everything that matters. Thank you." Then he wrote beneath it, "Devon Hale, my son and partner. We built something good." He thought about his father, about the photograph he carried, about the legacy of work and care passed down through generations. William Hale had built things that lasted. Theodore had lost everything he'd built. But maybe this mattered too. Maybe one perfect day of bringing people together was its own kind of success. Outside, Milldale slept. Inside the Riverside Diner, everything was ready. The kitchen was stocked and organized. The dining room was clean and welcoming. The jukebox was loaded with songs. The guest book waited for new signatures. Tomorrow, for one day, this place would be exactly what it was meant to be: a gathering place, a community heart, a testament to what people could build together when they cared. Theodore locked the door and went to sleep beside his son, their sleeping bags on the floor they'd cleaned together. Tomorrow would bring both celebration and loss. But tonight, there was only the quiet satisfaction of work completed, of promises kept, of showing up even when the outcome was uncertain. That was enough. It had to be enough. Theodore woke at 4 in the morning, his body thrumming with nervous energy. Opening day, the only day. He lay still for a moment, listening to Devon's steady breathing, then carefully extracted himself from the sleeping bag and headed to the kitchen. He worked in the pre-dawn darkness, moving through the familiar routines he'd practiced all week. Starting the coffee, 2 large pots, the smell filling the diner almost immediately. Mixing pancake batter, the consistency exactly right. Prepping hash brown potatoes, cutting them precisely. Setting up his station, so everything would be within easy reach. By 5:30, Devon joined him. They worked in comfortable silence, each knowing their role. Devon set up the dining room, arranging silverware, filling sugar dispensers, making sure every booth and table was perfect. Theodore began the cinnamon rolls. The dough he'd prepared yesterday, rolled out and filled, cut and placed in pans, set to rise one final time before baking. At 6, Beatrice arrived through the back door, carrying a small vase of flowers from her garden. "Good morning, gentlemen. Ready for this?" "As ready as we'll ever be," Theodore said. Beatrice put on an apron, tied back her white hair, and surveyed the dining room with the eye of someone who'd spent years serving others. "It's perfect," she pronounced. Iris came at 6:30, also in an apron, also ready. She and Devon exchanged a look, nervous excitement and something more. She squeezed his hand briefly before taking her position. At 7, Theodore slid the cinnamon rolls into the oven. The smell would draw people in, Beatrice had predicted. The smell of home, of care, of something made with love. 7:30. Theodore checked everything one final time. The griddle was hot. The eggs were ready. The bacon was laid out. Coffee was fresh and hot. Devon stood by the door, hand on the lock. Beatrice and Iris waited, ready to serve. The jukebox was queued up, waiting. 8 o'clock. Opening time. Devon unlocked the door and flipped the hand-painted sign from close to open. Theodore selected the first song on the jukebox, Sam Cooke, "What a Wonderful World," and music filled the diner. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Theodore felt his heart sink. What if nobody came? What if all this preparation was for an empty room? Then Gerald appeared at the door. He was dressed in a suit, a real suit, probably the one he wore to weddings and funerals. His hair was neatly combed. He carried a small bouquet of flowers. "First customer?" Gerald asked, smiling. "First and most welcome," Theodore said, his voice thick. Gerald stepped inside, and behind him a line appeared. 20 people, 30 more. Phyllis with her husband, Otto and Horace, Stanley with 6 other veterans, all in their dress uniforms, Florence with her students, families Theodore had never met, elderly couples, young parents with children, people who'd heard about the diner, who wanted to be part of this one perfect day. They flooded in, filling booths, taking stools at the counter, creating a warm buzz of conversation and laughter. Beatrice and Iris moved efficiently, seating people, pouring coffee, taking orders. Devon managed the chaos with calm competence, calling orders to Theodore, keeping track of everything. Theodore cooked. He fell into the rhythm he'd practiced, his hands moving with precision and care. Eggs scrambled in butter, seasoned perfectly. Hash browns pressed onto the hot griddle until they were crispy and golden. Pancakes poured in perfect circles, flipped at exactly the right moment. Bacon laid out in strips, cooked until just crisp. Each plate was composed with attention. Food arranged with care, garnished with a small parsley sprig Beatrice had brought. This was his craft, his offering, his way of saying thank you to people who'd given him hope when he had none. The timer chimed. Theodore pulled the cinnamon rolls from the oven, perfect golden brown, the cream cheese frosting going on while they were still hot, melting into the warm dough. The smell was transcendent. He plated the first one carefully, added a fork, and carried it himself through the kitchen door to where Beatrice sat at the counter. She'd insisted she would eat after the rush, but Theodore wanted her to have the first plate, the first perfect offering of the day. "First customer gets the owner's special attention," Theodore said, setting the plate before her. Beatrice looked at the cinnamon roll, then at Theodore, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "It's beautiful." "So are you," Theodore said. "Thank you for believing in us." She took a bite, closed her eyes, and smiled through her tears. "Stanley would have loved this. He would have been so proud of what you've done." Theodore squeezed her hand briefly, then returned to the kitchen. There was work to do. The morning became a blur of purposeful activity. Orders came steadily, breakfast plates, cinnamon rolls, endless cups of coffee. The jukebox played continuously, creating a soundtrack of nostalgia and joy. People lingered, talking across tables, reconnecting with neighbors they'd been avoiding, sharing stories and laughter. Theodore could hear it all from the kitchen, the sound of community, of people remembering what it felt like to belong to something. This was what the diner had been, what it could be again, if only for this one day. Devon appeared at the kitchen window, his face flushed with excitement. "Dad, we're running low on hash browns. There's more in the cooler. Bottom shelf. Table 6 wants to know if you can make the cinnamon rolls to go. They want to take some to their mother who couldn't come. Tell them yes. We'll box them up. The place is packed. There's a wait now." Theodore looked through the pass-through window at the crowded dining room. Every seat was taken. People stood talking by the jukebox. Children ran between tables laughing. The veterans' table was loud with conversation and old stories. A young couple sat in the corner booth, holding hands across the table, looking at each other the way people do when everything is new and possible. This was it. This was what they'd built. Not a business, not a property, but a moment of connection, of community, of remembering what mattered. "Keep them coming," Theodore said. "We'll feed everyone who shows up." By noon, they'd served over 100 people. The initial rush had settled into a steady flow, some leaving, new people arriving, a constant rotation of faces and stories. A local reporter appeared, taking photographs, interviewing customers. The high school newspaper sent a student journalist who sat at the counter, filling a notebook with observations. Gerald brought his wife, introducing her to Theodore. Otto's adult children drove in from 2 towns over. Former residents who'd heard about the opening returned to see the diner alive again, to remember what they'd left behind. And through it all, Theodore cooked. Each plate made with care, each meal an offering, each dish a small act of love for people who'd shown him kindness when he had nothing. This was what his father had meant about work being prayer. This was what mattered, not success or failure, not permanence or ownership, but the act of showing up and doing something good for others. One perfect day. That's all they'd get. But what a day it was. By 2 o'clock, the lunch crowd had arrived. People who'd heard about the opening and wanted to experience it before it was too late. The diner was fuller than it had been all morning, every surface occupied, conversations overlapping into a warm symphony of human connection. Theodore wiped sweat from his forehead and kept cooking. His body ached from standing, his hands were raw from the heat, but he didn't slow down. Devon appeared at the window regularly, calling orders, his face bright with something Theodore hadn't seen in over a year. Pure joy. Then Theodore noticed something new on the counter, a large glass jar that hadn't been there before. A handwritten sign was taped to it, "Save the Riverside Diner." "Devon," Theodore called. "What's that?" His son glanced over. "I don't know." "Someone put it there." Theodore watched through the kitchen window as people noticed the jar. Gerald pulled out his wallet, slipped in what looked like a 20. Phyllis added bills from her apron pocket. Stanley and his veteran friends pooled their money and stuffed it in together. Parents gave their children dollars to contribute. The jar began to fill. Theodore felt his throat tighten. They were trying. Even knowing it was impossible, they were trying to save something that mattered to them. At 3 o'clock, during a brief lull, Devon came to the kitchen and counted the jar. His hands shook slightly as he tallied the bills and checks. $8,300, he said quietly. In 5 hours. Theodore leaned against the counter, overwhelmed. It was nowhere near the $200,000 they needed, but it represented everything these people had. Their grocery money, their savings, their faith in something worth fighting for. It's not enough, Theodore said. I know, but Dad, look what they're doing. They're not giving up. Theodore had to step outside. He went out the back door into the alley, needing air, needing space to process the enormity of what was happening. He sat on the back step, head in his hands, trying not to cry. The door opened behind him. Devon sat beside him in silence. They're giving us more than they should, Theodore said. More than they can afford. They're not giving us money. They're saying thank you. Theodore looked at his son. For what? We're losing this place. Everything we built is going away. We gave them back something they'd forgotten, Devon said. We showed them they still matter to each other, that their town is worth fighting for, that caring about something isn't foolish. His voice was intense. That's worth more than a building, Dad. Before Theodore could respond, the back door opened again. Gerald stood there looking apologetic. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. Says his name is Charles Dockery. Theodore and Devon exchanged a glance, then went inside. A man in his 50s stood in the crowded diner, looking around with an expression Theodore couldn't quite read. He was well-dressed, but not ostentatious, his face weathered but kind. This was the man who owned the building, who was selling it, who was ending their dream. Charles Dockery saw them and approached. Mr. Hale, I'm Charles Dockery. I know who you are, Theodore said more harshly than he intended. Can we talk? Privately? They sat in the back booth away from the crowd. Charles looked uncomfortable, his hands folded on the table. I need to be honest with you, he began. When I won the legal case for this property, all I saw was money. My aunt had been fighting me for years, and I was angry. I just wanted to sell it and be done with the whole mess. Theodore said nothing. I called the development company this morning. Told them I wanted to come see the property one more time before we finalized everything. Charles looked around the diner. I didn't expect this. We're just trying to give people one good day before you tear it down, Devon said, his voice tight. I can see that. Charles watched as Beatrice served a family, as children laughed, as the jukebox played. My uncle used to talk about this place. He loved it. Said it was the heart of the town. I never understood what he meant. I thought he was just being sentimental about an old building. He turned back to Theodore. But it's not about the building, is it? No, Theodore said quietly. It's not. Charles was quiet for a long moment. Then I called the development company from my car. Told them the deal is off. Theodore's breath caught. What? I can't sell it to them. Not after seeing this, understanding what it means. Charles leaned forward. But I also can't afford to keep an empty property. I'm not wealthy. I'm a high school teacher. This was supposed to be my retirement fund. So what are you saying? Devon asked. I'm saying, what if the town bought it? What if we formed a cooperative and the community owned it together? Charles pulled out a notebook where he'd been doing calculations. The development company was offering $200,000. He'd accept $150,000 from the town. And I'll hold the property for 6 months, no rent, no fees, while you raise the money. Theodore couldn't speak. Devon's eyes were wide. You'd do that? Devon finally asked. My uncle loved this place. He'd want it to live again properly. And what you've done here, Charles gestured around. This is what he always dreamed it could be. Gerald, who'd been listening nearby, immediately started organizing. We can do this. We'll fundraise, reach out to former residents, apply for grants. Beatrice stood up. We'll finally fight for something instead of just accepting loss. The energy in the diner shifted instantly. People began talking excitedly, making plans, pledging additional donations. Florence pulled out her phone to start a social media campaign. Phyllis began calculating how much the local businesses could contribute. Stanley talked about veterans organizations that might help. Charles shook Theodore's hand. Keep cooking. The town needs this. After Charles left, Theodore stood in the middle of the diner, surrounded by people who'd decided that hope was worth fighting for. The jar continued to fill. People made phone calls. Plans formed organically, passionately. Devon found his father in the chaos. Did that just happen? I think it did. We have 6 months. We do. We might actually save this place. Theodore pulled his son into an embrace, holding him tight. Around them, the diner buzzed with renewed purpose. The day they'd planned as a farewell had become a beginning instead. Back to work, Theodore said, wiping his eyes. We've got people to feed. Yes, we do. They returned to their stations, Theodore to the kitchen, Devon to managing the floor. The jukebox played on. The coffee flowed. The cinnamon rolls kept coming from the oven. And in the donation jar, hope accumulated $1 at a time. The Riverside Diner wasn't dying. It was being reborn. 5 months later, Theodore stood outside the Riverside Diner watching Otto and Horace install the new sign. It was hand-painted, crafted by Florence's art students, and it read, Riverside Diner Community Owned. The fundraising campaign had exceeded everyone's expectations. Former residents donated from across the country. Neighboring towns contributed. A state grant for rural revitalization provided $20,000. Local businesses pledged monthly support. By the end of April, they'd raised $162,000, enough to buy the property and establish an operating fund. The town formed a cooperative. 43 families bought shares at $500 each, becoming collective owners. Theodore and Devon were given shares for their work, their sweat equity recognized formally. A board was elected, Gerald as president, Beatrice as treasurer, Phyllis handling operations. But the real work happened every Friday, Saturday and Sunday when the diner opened for breakfast. Theodore cooked, Devon managed operations, and a rotating cast of volunteers, Beatrice, Iris, community members, kept everything running. It wasn't glamorous or particularly profitable yet, but it was sustainable. It was real. The sign went up straight and true, catching the afternoon light. A small crowd had gathered to watch, the same people who'd helped make this possible. Looks good, Gerald said, standing beside Theodore. It does. You two did something remarkable here. You know that, right? Theodore thought about it. 5 months ago, they'd been homeless, sleeping in a truck, with nothing but a toolbox and fading hope. Now they lived in a small apartment above the diner, not fancy but warm and dry. Devon had started taking online business courses. Theodore mentored 2 young people from the high school in cooking and repair work, passing on skills the way his father had passed them to him. We couldn't have done it alone, Theodore said. That's exactly right. That's the whole point, Gerald smiled. None of us can do much alone. But together, we can do remarkable things. The installation complete, Otto and Horace climbed down. Everyone stood back to admire the sign, proof that a community could fight for what mattered, could save something worth saving. Inside the diner, Theodore found Devon and Iris sitting at the counter, heads close together, looking at something on Devon's laptop. Iris had become a fixture here, spending her days off helping with operations, her practical nursing skills translating well to restaurant management. She and Devon had grown close, careful with each other, but clearly building towards something lasting. What are you two plotting? Theodore asked. Expansion plans, Devon said, grinning. Iris thinks we should add lunch service in 6 months if the breakfast keeps growing. 1 step at a time, Theodore cautioned, but he was smiling. That evening, after everyone left, Theodore stood alone in the diner with his father's toolbox. The red metal was still scratched and dented, but Theodore had cleaned it, maintained it, and now he was passing it forward. He'd asked Justin, one of the high school students he mentored, to come by. The young man arrived promptly, curious and slightly nervous. Justin, you've been helping here for 3 months now, Theodore said. You're good with your hands, patient with details, willing to learn. Those are gifts worth developing. Thank you, sir. Theodore picked up the toolbox and held it out. This was my father's. He gave it to me when I started my first real job. I'd like you to have it. Justin's eyes went wide. I can't take that. It's yours. It's mine to give. These tools are meant to be used to build things, to fix what's broken. They're meant to pass from one generation to the next. Theodore pressed the toolbox into Justin's hands. Use them well. Take care of them. And someday, when you've taught someone else what they need to know, pass them forward. Justin held the toolbox like it was sacred, understanding the weight of what he'd been given. I will. I promise. After he left, Devon found Theodore standing by the window, looking out at Milldale's main street. Other businesses had started opening again. A bookstore, a small hardware cooperative, a coffee shop. The diner's revival had sparked something, reminded people that renewal was possible. You okay, Dad? I'm just thinking about your grandfather. Wishing he could see this. I think he can, Devon said. I think he'd be proud. Even though I lost everything? Even though we're not wealthy or successful by normal measures? Devon considered the question seriously. You lost a business, but you found something more important. You found out what really matters. Community, purpose, the dignity of honest work shared with people you care about. He gestured around the diner. Grandpa would be proud of this. I know I am. Theodore felt tears threatening again, but this time they were different, not grief or shame, but gratitude for the journey that had brought them here, for the son who'd never stopped believing, for the community that had taken them in. I'm proud of you too, Theodore said. You've become a better man than I ever was. I became the man you taught me to be. They stood together in the diner they'd built from nothing, surrounded by evidence of what persistence and community could create. The guest book now had hundreds of signatures. The jukebox played every weekend. The kitchen Theodore had restored fed people who'd become friends, neighbors, family. Outside, darkness settled over Milldale, but the diner's lights glowed warm and welcoming, visible from blocks away. A beacon that said, this place matters, these people matter, showing up matters. Theodore thought about that first morning, making coffee in an abandoned building, not knowing if anything good could come from their situation. He thought about every person who'd helped, every small act of faith, every choice to believe that building something good was worth the effort, even when success wasn't guaranteed. Maybe that was the real lesson. Not that everything works out, but that the trying itself, the showing up, the work, the care, that's where meaning lives. Not in guarantees or security, but in the daily choice to create something good for others. Devon headed upstairs to their apartment. Theodore stayed a moment longer, turning off lights, checking that everything was secure for the night. Tomorrow they'd open again. People would come, coffee would brew, food would be cooked and served with care. Music would play. Conversations would happen. Life would continue in this small space that had become the heart of a community remembering how to hope. Theodore locked the door and climbed the stairs to home. Modest but his, built on work and community rather than ownership and wealth. Some things were worth fighting for. Some things were worth building slowly, one day at a time. Some things were worth showing up for, even when the outcome was uncertain. This was one of those things, and that was enough.